So I'm going to talk a little bit about the rewriting of history by conservatives. And the reason for rewriting history in this case is to hide the fact that they robbed the savings and loans, the banks, of, I don't know, I think it was $800 billion or something, I'm not sure. In today's money, it certainly would be. It was the first time that there was this massive transfer of wealth from the poor and middle class, mostly, to the rich. And the way they did it was simple. And you wouldn't even know who Jamal Khashoggi is right now if it wasn't for Adnan Khashoggi. Okay, yeah, Adnan's dad was physician to the King of Saudi Arabia, but you would never even know that unless Adnan hadn't become the big middleman between Saudi Arabia and the United States and made his millions being in between. I know his first shipment was of jets, and I think they were F-16s, not really sure. But he made a lot of money that way, and that's how he made his name. But the truth is, he probably made more money by being a middleman in the Iran-Contra affair, because he was in the middle with Israelis, which is what started this whole Saudi Arabian-Israeli relationship. Originally it was mostly business, where they were getting in between, and I'm including Saudi Arabia as well as Khashoggi. And by the way, his name is Khashoggi, okay? I lived with his brother for a long time, Assam Khashoggi, so I should know. My mother was there when they had the conversation about how they wanted their name pronounced in the United States and how they wanted to spell it. They actually removed the H and pronounced it Khashoggi. So all of you out there, don't worry about saying Khashoggi or Khashoggi or Khashoggi. Don't worry about that. Just call them Khashoggis. That's what they are. You can go to Santa Barbara and talk to Assam or his daughter, who was friends with me, and I lived with him a lot. So that's how I know all this stuff. And Assam was always really great guy to me. He was like a father to me. You know, he was actually technically he was my godfather. They asked him if something happened to my parents to take care of me. Him and Doris, his wife. Anyway, so, you know, Adnan's the guy. I mean, you never would have even heard of Khashoggi. And Jamal would have never been anybody of importance if, you know, it hadn't been for Adnan being of importance that gave him a leg up. And of course, Adnan's father, his father's brother, or his mother's brother. I mean, if he's a cousin, it's got to be one or the other, right? Is of some significance, but it's significant only in terms of a rung on the ladder, not so much as of an important rung as Adnan, but Adnan wouldn't have gotten to where he was without his father being physician to the king. Anyway, that's not what this is about. What I'm talking about here is mainly how they've rewritten Ronald Reagan's history to try and make out he was some kind of great guy. And in this case, I'm going to talk about the savings and loan. I call it a heist. because it was a heist. Um, and I think I'll break this up into segments. I'll talk in this segment about the savings and loan heist, and I'll also talk about the other things in relation to them, but I'll cover them separately. So I'll cover the Contras and the illegal use of our taxpayer money, or stolen bank money, to fund the Contras, to lubricate it, so to speak. They didn't really fund it. It lubricated it. It created ways for them to smuggle cocaine into the country, for instance, and make more money for buying and arms for the Contras. And then as another segment, I'll talk about Iran and the deal that was made to get the hostages out in October surprise. All of these things are highly illegal, right? None of them should have been done. And I think as part of Iran, I'll talk about how I believe that Carter's attempt to save the hostages, to get them out, I believe it was sabotaged. I believe it was an act of sabotage. The helicopter going down on the way there, and having mechanical problems. Nah, I'm not buying it. We have deserts here, and we train in the desert, and that's just bullshit. It's just bullshit. And everything about all the evil stuff that conservatives and Republicans do that are called coincidences, like God is looking down on them and causing helicopters to malfunction and whatever. It's all bullshit. These are all things that happen because people do things to make them happen. Sabotage and stuff. So, I'm going to talk about Reagan, and I'm going to show you other people's stuff. And let's just be honest and tear down this bullshit persona of him. Yes, he was an actor, and he was able to pull off, the big cowboy, macho, Pichu bullshit. But, in real life, of course, everybody has a good side, right? But in his case, he had a very, very bad and evil side. And it was petty, too. It was very petty. It was very much wanting to prove to everybody that he was something that he was not, which is honest, and not a thief. He was a thief. He helped steal just so much money and they did it all under the guise of national security. So if you wanted to try and track the money offshore, because the money, the way it went was pretty simple. Okay, first of all, Ronald Reagan deregulated the banks, but they were still federally insured, so the money would all have to come out of the taxpayer's pocket once it was gone. And they put their kids, like Jeb Bush and Neil Bush and one of the other Bushes, in fact all the Bushes, Marvin Bush, all these guys, they've all been put into places where they could arrange not just the loans to mafia people, mobsters, but they also transferred money to the 9/11 hijackers. So the Prince Bandar, or as he's called, Bandar Bush, his wife arranged $100,000 to Muhammad Atta, and it went through a CIA bank. I forget the name in Washington, D.C., but it was just a CIA front. And it was Marvin Bush was, I believe it was Marvin. There's a couple of Bushes involved in this stuff. Anyway, between him and Prince Bandar Bush's wife, they managed to get money. And everybody knows this, and nobody's in jail, nobody's facing execution, because for that, you could definitely get the death penalty. Funding, directly funding Muhammad Atta. You don't think so? I do. Anyway, so on top of what they did with the banks, they also did a lot of other things, a lot of other evil stuff. But as far as the banks go, I'll see if I can find the Treasury memo about the Treasury agent who tried to track the money. So what they would do is they would put their kids, like the Bush's kids and all their friends, in charge of all these banks. They'd be presidents of these banks, CEOs, executive officers, whatever. And then they would make sure the loans got ran through to BB and all these really, criminals, known criminals, right? Suspected, but to an extent that they just couldn't put them in jail. So they purposely arranged for all these people to get these loans that they would never pay back, and I'm sure for a chunk of it, for a percentage, these people would just say, well, we just, it was a failure. We couldn't pay it back. Whether any of them would see jail time or not, who knows, but they made so much money that, a couple years in jail, if they even got that, I don't know. I'll look into it now, so that I'll kind of rebuild my case that I've put together way in the past when I studied this stuff, and I'll show you. And the money went into offshore accounts very often, which these people will claim was at tax haven, and then they'll claim they lost it by reinvesting it into things that didn't exist. So they didn't really invest it. But the Treasury agent that I read his report, the actual Treasury report, and I'll see if I can find it, but if I can't, you'll just have to take my word for it. He claims that he followed the money out to the Bahamas and these places like that, offshore, and that Adnan Khashoggi's name was all over it. And from there it just disappeared. And he claims that he was facing some kind of, I think he claimed that he was facing what he considered to be interference by intelligence people over national security. So national security, they didn't want anybody tracking that money any farther than, say, the Bahamas or wherever. So that's pretty much what I'm going to cover in these pieces. And what they're going to show you is that, take your pick. Ronald Reagan, take your pick. Was he stupid and just a pawn? Or was he like Phil Hartman used to portray him on Saturday Night Live as a shrewd politician and businessman running everything, and just really evil when you get right down to it. And I'll see if I can find that clip and throw it in. So that's what my segments will be about.